Hello everyone, this is Emilia speaking from Couch English, channel dedicated to practical business English. And in fact, not only, because usually during the podcast, during the webinars, or even the shorts, what I provide to you is the practical knowledge connected with different kind of areas of business. I specialize generally in human resources area and also in running trainings for different kind of the employees and different levels of the organizations. Although, of course, HR is my favorite topic due to the fact that I've been working in that area for the last 15 years. So what I do is that I combine different levels of my expertise, and that's why what I also do on a regular basis is that I do my best to share my knowledge, my expertise in terms of business English, obviously, but also in terms of the working knowledge in various types of the business areas. Today, we are going to focus on the process, on the program of succession planning, which is very important if we talk about business continuity. So let's start maybe with the definition, and still that word that I already applied, like business continuity, it will be probably perpetuating during my podcast today. If it is about succession planning program, that's the program that is designed to ensure the continuity of the processes in terms of key and critical positions. And again, I would underline, I would emphasize that it is extremely important that we have to understand without what kind of the positions the business continuity could be at risk. It is extremely important because it might happen that we have in the company several different kind of the positions, but still, even if anybody holding one of the positions is going to go on a sick leave, is going to leave the organization, something unexpected is going to happen. Probably, if we manage properly the process of that person, if we manage properly the responsibilities, still, of course, the business will be possible to be continued. Uh, on one hand, because we manage the process of deputizing, of sharing the responsibilities in a proper way, but on the other hand, it's also connected with the specifics of the roles. Because if you probably have a look at your organizations, at the different kind of the positions in your organizations, you will be able to indicate that kind of the positions which are not so critical for the organization. And even if somebody is going to be missing for a moment, still it will be possible, even without the execution of that person responsibilities, it will be still possible, let's say, to survive and to manage, and not high risk is going to happen without the execution of that person's responsibility. On the other hand, I'm also sure that you would be able to indicate that kind of the roles or even that kind of the employees without whom it would be difficult to survive in the company. And probably without the decision of that particular position and the person, we wouldn't be able to proceed further. So that's why in succession planning program, we have to really understand what kind of the positions are critical to business, are critical to decisiveness, and are necessary to be appointed. Otherwise, we're going, unfortunately, to lose some key benefits of the business. So business continuity is the main aspect connected with the succession planning. Apart from that, strictly from the HR point of view, I'm sorry, there are different kind of the takeaways, different kind of the benefits that we can point if we think about succession planning. Definitely, if I were to list some of those benefits, I would concentrate probably on the advancement opportunities. Because if I have succession planning in place, I will be able to ensure and guarantee, to some extent, of course, to my employees that they will be able to develop within my organization. They will see what kind of the career opportunities they may expect in the company. So from the point of view of their development, from the point of view of their advancement, and at the same time, from the point of view of the retention, it will be something extremely valuable for the employees. So the benefit on one hand, strictly dedicated to the company, business continuity, and of course also the benefit dedicated at the first glance at least to the employees because of this advancement and development possibilities. And I think that I would complete that list of the benefits or even the reasons why we should have the succession planning program in place is the knowledge management. Because if we know that we have succession program in place, we will be also able to ensure that the knowledge, the responsibilities, the key information in the company, it is going to be conveyed, it is going to be transferred from one person to another person, from one role to another role. So knowledge management, knowledge transfer, I should probably even rather say, is going to be extremely important if we talk about succession planning. One more thing critical in terms of succession planning is that most typically when the process of succession planning is being introduced in the organizations, it concerns mainly the managerial roles. It doesn't have to be like that, but usually in the companies, if we think about different kind of the programs connected with that business continuity and development of the employees, it works this way. So if we assume that the main goal of the succession planning is to be able to appoint people who are going to be able to replace the critical roles, then we can say that either it can be, of course, connected, either it can entail managerial positions, but of course it can be connected with any other position, rather related to probably the expert and specialists. And again, in some of the organizations, succession planning is going to be dedicated to these critical roles, key roles, understood as managerial positions. But in some of the organizations, it's going to be wider. And then these critical and key roles are going to be understood as any kind of the role, which is simply, again, critical to the organization. So it can be managerial role, it can be also the expert role, it can be the specialist role. The reason why some of the organizations, they will divide those critical key roles into different kind of the programs is also connected with the fact that quite often we will be looking for a bit different competences, a bit different skills, and also the program can be designed in the different way. So that's why sometimes succession planning is going to be dedicated to managerial roles. And on the other hand, we can have the program of critical roles. And then if it is about the experts, if it is about the specialist positions, those kind of positions are going to be covered, are going to be embraced in the critical roles program. Moving a little bit further, to the type of the positions or to the type of the roles that are going to be incorporated in succession planning. We're going to have there two roles. The first role, that's the role of the successor. So the person who is going to be appointed to potentially take over the role, take over the responsibilities of another person who is right now being in the role of, for example, manager. The second person, and that's a little bit baffling, that's a little bit confusing because not always we have even a good word for that second person. So somebody who is right now taking that position. So let's say that, for example, I know that in my company, there is the head of sales. And that person is currently having that kind of the position. And I know that that particular role is quite critical the organization. So probably I should incorporate that particular role to the succession planning. So then the person who is holding that position right now is going to be called predecessor or mentor. Sometimes in the companies, we even call this person just like manager. So it is really a little bit confusing and baffling with the name because mentor, not to full extent, predecessor is quite an, I would say, like difficult word. That's why sometimes we have a problem how to call that particular person. But let's say still this head of sales, that's going to be the mentor predecessor. So the person who is right now having the role of that managerial position. And that's the second person. So somebody who is going to take over that role, probably somebody who is going to take over the responsibility, somebody who is going to gain the knowledge from that head of sales, it's successor. So the person who is potentially going to be prepared for taking over the role. So we have two roles in the succession planning program. Again, mentor, predecessor, depending on the company, even the names of that role can differ. And how about the stages that we can meet in terms of succession planning? I would say that the most important stage is the first one. Identifying the key position. Because here, of course, I can have some kind of embedded conviction that probably everybody on the top position, all the, for example, senior managers, well, definitely if they are on the top, if they are on the top of the organizational structure, they should be identified as key positions, but not necessarily. So I have to come back to something what I mentioned at the very beginning. So if I want to identify the key position, I just have to remember what is going to happen if that particular position is going to disappear from the company. If the person who is right now working on that position is going to go on sick leave. Will the business survive or not? If I have that kind of the question mark in my head and I understand that most probably it's really going to have very harmful impact on the organization, then probably it means that this is the key position to be identified. So that's the first point. I have to identify the key positions. And I would say that automatically, the second thing which I would have to do is to also identify what are the key responsibilities of that role. And I'm not even saying about the job description, because quite often the job descriptions are quite general. They can be even quite blurry. So from reading the job description, I will still not understand what that person does. So by key responsibilities, I rather want to concentrate on the goals, objectives, and tasks which are done by this person on a regular basis, because that's how I'm going to understand better what that person does. And I will be also able to translate those responsibilities, tasks, and objectives into, on one hand, succession plan program, because I will know what the successor has to learn. But on the other hand, it's also going to be much easier for me to understand how those particular tasks, objectives, and goals, and of course responsibilities, how they translate into the competencies. So it will be much easier for me to start from that and not from the definition of the competences. At that stage, so when I have already identified the key positions, when I have also those key responsibilities, tasks, and objectives, I can already think about the first selection of the responsibilities, tasks, and objectives that are going to be assigned to the successor. I can think about it. So I can, of course, already prepare the list, but definitely after some time, I will have to do the review. And why? Because at that stage, I still don't know who the successor is. So I don't know how that person is ready to take over the responsibilities and duties. If there are any kind of the competences missing, if there is any kind of the knowledge that for the even first few months that person is going to be missing, or maybe for a longer time period. So of course, here I'm selecting the responsibilities and tasks assigned, and of course the ones to be learned by the successor. But still, I will have to review those responsibilities, those tasks, when the successor is going to be chosen. So for now, it's a little bit more, let's say, a blurry list, maybe not a blurry list, but it is more theoretical, a list to be done, but very important, because that's how I'm going also to understand how to prepare the particular stages and the training program for the successor, of course, in the further steps. And from responsibilities, I can move to competences. So here I will be able to understand what particular skills, knowledge has to be assigned to the person who is right now in that role of mentor, in that role of the predecessor, because I will know, okay, what that person does. So what kind of skills, competences are required to be able, of course, to match the responsibilities, the tasks with the proper efficiency. And of course, that will be for me also the first step to be able then to do the assessment for the successor and check to what extent that person, successor, meets the competencies that are assigned for that particular role. And after that, of course, I'm moving to defining criteria for successor. So I have to think here a little bit more what particular skills, what particular, even I would say, qualities of the approach, of the attitude that person has to have to become the successor. And definitely here, I'm going to concentrate on the competences that are assigned to the role of mentor predecessor. Because, for example, if that was the head of sales, I will understand that most probably, if it is about that particular position, what is really important is to have, for example, strategic thinking or analytical thinking, or to have the customer focus. So everything what is strictly connected with the competences assigned to that particular role, the role of mentor, the role of the predecessor, and of course then the same competences are going to be required from the successor. But that's not only something what I should assign, because I should also understand the goal of the succession planning. So if I know that that's the process, which for sure is going to take some time, the second thing is that I don't have the guarantee that the successor is going to really replace the predecessor. It might happen that not. So I have to understand what can be the roadblocks in the process, and I have to also somehow translate them into expectations or this criteria for successor that will have to be met. So not only the competences, but I need to understand that I need to have somebody who has long-term potential. So the person who will be willing to develop in the longer time period, because probably preparation for this predecessor role is not going to take like 1 week or 1 month or even 3 months, because predecessor probably, if that person is having this high position, has quite a lot of knowledge, quite a lot of responsibilities, quite high level of accountability. So if we want to prepare a successor for this predecessor role, well, we have to invest a lot of time, and not everybody would be willing to wait. So I would say that this long-term potential is something really important in the criteria for the purpose of choosing the successor. And then another thing I would say, I wouldn't again put it into the competences for the role, but it will be something for all the successors. So apart from this long-term potential, I would also say, I'm sorry for a moment. I would also say that we have to concentrate here on somebody who is open for learning, who is open to contribute to the mentoring program. Somebody who is like really concentrated on the continuous development and continuous learning. Because if that person is not open to gain the knowledge, to acquire some competences, to spend some time with the mentor, of course, for the purpose of this knowledge transfer, it won't work. And another thing, I would also put it aside if we compare it with that competences for the specific role. Another thing I would say is adaptability, because different things can happen. We don't have this guarantee that the succession program is going to be successful, but we are at the same time building the high potential of the successor. So it might happen that after some time it's going to occur that maybe not taking over the role, but maybe we will find some other possibilities in the company for the successor. So long-term potential, openness to learning, continuous learning, of course, approach, and adaptability, I would put them aside from the competency skill sets. And all the successors, in my opinion, should really follow these three. I'm not even sure if I can call them competences. I would say these are like the qualities of the approach of the person. And of course, if I have the criteria, then I can identify the successors. Of course, always taking into consideration if there is a willingness, because it can happen that I have in my team, in my company, the person who would be a perfect successor for this sales head, but at the same time, that person doesn't want to have that role. So identifying and evaluating the potential successor, I also have to take into consideration uh, well, the needs, the potential of that particular employee. And after that, I need to move also to defining not only the criteria for successor, but also I need to check what are going to be my success factors. So how am I going to recognize from the HR point of view, from the organizational point of view, if the program is successful or not? So that point is not even about that one particular succession for the position of head of sales, but rather the program as the whole. So I'm having a look at that program from more horizontal, from more helicopter perspective. So here probably I will have to think about some specific KPIs. So it might happen that I will recognize that the succession program, succession planning is successful, depending, for example, on the number of the people who applied for the roles of the successors. Or I can recognize that it is successful depending on how many successors or candidates for successors really became those successors. So I will check, of course, the efficiency as well. I can probably also check, I can also probably assign some particular KPIs connected with the knowledge transfer. So how quickly, for example, in what kind of the scope the transition of the knowledge was being done. And of course, I can decide how quickly the successor is able to take fully over the role. So if I assume that, for example, from time to time, when the program is going to be already in place, the predecessor is maybe going to go on some kind of the project, or is going to take, for example, like 1 month of the vacation or the sabbatical or whatever else, then I will recognize that if the successor is able to fully take over the role, that yes, my program is successful. So the timeline would also have to be defined here. And the next point is about defining the objectives and key results. Here already I'm going a little bit down, and I'm narrowing a little bit, also constricting the perspective, and I'm checking the particular objectives and key results for all of the successors. So if I know that one of the successors is appointed for that position of head of sales, then I'm going to also prepare the list of the objectives of the key results by which I'm going to measure the success of one particular succession. And the other thing is connected with the knowledge transfer. So here we need to have a very accurate plan, the checklist with understanding how those responsibilities that we defined at the very beginning can be, of course, transferred by the means of the knowledge to the successor. So what kind of the knowledge, what kind of the documents, what kind of the information reports have to be shared with the successor to make sure that this person is going to be able to master the knowledge, to be, of course, able to perform the responsibilities. And after that, I'm also designing the training tools. So here it's also that moment that I'm coming back to the review of the responsibilities, because at that stage, I'm already able to decide what is the competency, what is the skill gap. So I will know what kind of the competences the successor has already developed on a quite high level, and maybe I don't have to invest much, but at the same time I will be able to recognize what kind of the competences have to be definitely, of course, developed. So I will have to decide on different kind of the mentoring, training, coaching tools applied for the purpose of the success. And coming back to some of the stages related to the succession planning program, I think I would also move a little bit more to the process, or to the point, or to the stage connected with identification of a successor. So here we have, of course, different kind of the methods. I'm not sure if the gut feeling would be the best one, probably not, but I can imagine that it can also happen. But let's stay professional. And probably what we can do here is that we can do the competency analysis. So if in the company we have different kind of the competency models, we can just do the match and we can check what are the competencies needed on the position of the predecessor. We will compare it with the profile of the successor and we will check, is there a match or not? Or is the potential for the development or not? I can also, of course, apply different kind of the psychometric tests. Among the others, I can check in by that test if the person who is going to take over most probably the role in the nearest future has, for example, the leadership potential. Of course, that particular way of analyzing if somebody has the proper potential to become the successor is connected with the role. But as I mentioned at the very beginning, today we're concentrating on the succession planning, understood as succession planning for the managerial positions. That's why we can also, of course, do the leadership potential analysis. And usually, apart from the competences, I simply have to check how the successor right now, having the position that they have in the current moment, how they are, of course, performing. I need to check if they are efficient or not, because competencies are competencies, but still, of course, I want to know that somebody simply delivers. So I need to check if the person is efficient. So if I'm going to check their KPIs, their goals execution, if I'm going to check how about the performance reviews, I also will be able to see, okay, competences checked, performance checked, so I can move a little bit further in terms of identification, of course, of the successor. And from the point of view of the further points and stages that I was mentioning in the previous part of the podcast, I would say that something what is also critical in terms of the knowledge transfer, but also in terms of verification and doing some kind of the milestones, checking if the program is successful or not. What is going to be also important here is that I need to very precisely define the objectives for the predecessor, making sure that this person is not only acquiring the knowledge, but is able to translate that knowledge into the working practice. And that's really extremely important, because otherwise what can happen is that predecessor is going to share the knowledge, sharing, and nothing. So I will have the knowledge, but I will simply not know how to apply it. That's why what I need to do here, from the HR point of view, from the organizational point of view, is that I have to think how the successor is going to be able to transform, to translate all this knowledge acquired into some practical areas of expertise. So I can, for example, decide that maybe there are some kind of the projects during which the successor is going to be able to test, experiment a little bit more with the knowledge already acquired and with the competences developed. I also should probably concentrate here on the decisiveness level, because I can imagine, the same as with any kind of the delegation, that at the very beginning, when the successor will start executing some kind of the tasks, that person will be rather doing that under the custody, under the supervision of the predecessor. But with time, we will take a decision. What kind of the tasks, what kind of the objectives, what kind of the decisions can be in hands of the successor, and this person can take full accountability, and what kind of the decisions are still going to remain in the hands of the predecessor. So different kind of the tools by which I'm going to be able to translate the knowledge into practical working one. And of course, if we said about earlier about the training program, as you can see, we can think, okay, maybe some trainings, internal, external, maybe job shadowing to some extent, maybe on the job, maybe some kind of cross training. So we're taking a decision, what kind of trainings will be done internally, externally. Maybe the coaching process is going to be necessary, because that person has to work a little bit more on their potential, on the understanding how they can, of course, also use their potential, how they can leverage their potential. So it will be also sometimes the work also on their self-confidence and the better understanding of their internal resources. So maybe coaching, and definitely it has to be about mentoring. Of course, mentoring done by the mentor, by the predecessor. So it also means that that person, I mean the predecessor, the mentor, has to be very well prepared to mentoring, because it's not only about sharing the knowledge. It's about combination of sharing the knowledge, of using different kind of the coaching tools, of guiding, of course, the successor, how they can become like more efficient. So preparation is going to be also extremely important here. And I believe that I would finish with something that in fact should be placed like really on the top. Because one of the most important reasons why succession planning not always is successful and efficient is the predecessor, is the mentor, but not because of their, let's say, like wrong approach, but because of the fact that they don't understand well the program, and they don't understand well their role in the program. And please believe me, from my daily practice, that very often I found that kind of situations, that the mentors, predecessors, they didn't want to share the knowledge, or for example, they were not agreeing to appoint some particular successor, and the reality was that they were simply afraid. They were afraid that the successor is going to very quickly take over the role, and then what is going to happen with the predecessor? Is that person going to be terminated, fired, or maybe demoted to a lower position? And very often they were really simply afraid, and that's why they were rejecting that program. They were rebelling against that programs, although not necessarily they were, of course, agreeing that that's about their approach, that they are afraid. Because how can I be like extremely important manager, leader, and how can I then admit that I'm simply afraid? So usually it will be, of course, about some superficial behaviors, but the reality can be really that the mentor, the predecessor, is simply afraid. That's why what we have to guarantee in succession program, in succession planning, is the goal, the role for the predecessor. So we have to show that person how their future in the company is going to look, because maybe we have for them some other opportunity and they are just preparing for the promotion. Or we have to show them that that's not the threat. And if they are going to have the successor, that person is going to be help them and assist them in, for example, their work. So it will be also connected a bit, for example, with deputizing. So this is something really important to understand what can be the underlying reason why mentor predecessor can be afraid of handing over the role. And if we're going to address their gaps, their fears, their lack of motivation, it's going to be definitely much easier for us to run the process much more smoothly. I believe that that's how I would finish today podcast about succession planning. Of course, if you're interested in a bit more of the content related to business topics, related to the courses like English courses that we run for specialists, like English for HR, English for recruiters, for managers, and different kind of the positions, you can contact us. You can also follow our YouTube channel. You have there the QR code, so let me invite you, of course, to enter that QR code, and podcast, webinars, shorts, everything is available there. And of course, if you're going to have any kind of the questions, I'm definitely inviting you to contact us and I will be happy to answer them. Thank you very much for being there today.